this panel before we left for lunch. So our moderator this afternoon will be Racheal Nakitare from KBC, Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. Okay, I think it's going to be a very interesting panel. So I think without much ado, Racheal, please take over the control of the session.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This could be an interesting session, but considering that we just had some very heavy lunch, we really need to keep people awake. Thank you, Barack. This session, which is the third session, is going to discuss safeguarding free speech and privacy online in an electoral context. And I was just, even as I looked at this title, I think I was asking myself, I don't know how many times, I wanted to count but I didn't have enough time, how many times we have used or we have read the word hate speech this year alone, 2017, compared to the last 4 years. Just the use of the word hate speech, either on media, either media online or published hard copies, or but how many times we've used that word. I wish somebody would do that homework and just see how many times we've used it this year alone compared to the past 4 years. So I have a very formidable panel here. I'll introduce them from my extreme left. We have Wakabi, Wairagala, from the collaboration on international ICT policy in East and Southern Africa, CIPESA, Uganda. Karibu sana. And next to Wakabi is Racheal Otsieno, the Nation Media Group, in charge of ICT, online, digital media at national media. And on my right is Commissioner Dr. Joseph Nasongo, Commissioner with the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. And on the my extreme right is James Ratemo, who is the head of the communications of the Media Council of Kenya. Karibuni sana. So considering that I've been told we just have an hour, I would want us to go straight to the point. We're going to make it very interactive. We'll just discuss, and of course we'll also give you time to ask your questions. And so I'll ask each of the panelists to respond to the first question, which would be, considering that this is an election year, what are the current threats to free speech and privacy online? I can start with you, Wakabi.
Yeah, thanks. Election years all the time always come with the potential for both state and non-state actors to put various caveats on free speech and privacy. And yet, this is the time when, probably more than any other time, citizens need unfettered access to information and free speech in order to be able to make good decisions regarding the leaders that they're going to choose. The history narrative tells us that election times have come with a number of challenges. This is when we see a number of laws coming up to regulate SMS use, a number of regulations coming up to regulate social media, and in some instances we've also seen shutdowns at election time, such as the two that we experienced in Uganda last year, but also in a couple of many other countries, Chad, Congo, Gambia. Election times have come with such challenges. So, in a nutshell, I think we see threats at two levels. One of them coming from the state, and they include the lawmaking that I've talked about, that curtail free speech, that also goes many times against individuals' privacy. But we also see quite a bit of an increase in surveillance by the state on distance communications and other actions online. We see a bit of intercepts of citizens' communications, but also from the part of citizens, we see a lot of intimidation and bullying online, especially of individuals who are vocal online or who may have divergent opinion, and many times this has included politicians that are women. The sum total of this, of course, is that many people are forced to withdraw from speaking out and campaigning at a time when they be speaking out.
Thank you very much, Wakabi. Racheal, as you take the same question about the threats, maybe you could also expound on whether freedom of expression is the same as free speech.
Wow. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think I see the threats in nearly 3 levels. The first one, election by itself, is a context, it's a political context. People looking for political power towards various ends. The point at time we are in, a lot of that context happens through communications, and mostly non-mediated in the sense that my messages can get to an audience without somebody else having to intervene. Now, the first question that brings an issue is that not all of us have the same access to that platform. That given various socioeconomic reasons, you may have better access than my sister in Turkana or my brother in Mombasa. So there arises a question there: can we have equal votes if we don't have equal access to the conversation? Number 2, depending on our knowledge levels, or if you like it, the functional literacy of being able to apply yourself into that space. I may have that smartphone, I may have the bandwidth, but do I know how to navigate that space to bring out the political meaning out of it? Or to apply the various techniques involved to make sure that as big a chunk of the population gets my message as possible. I think that disparities at that level too. But the third level is, a few of us in our society know that message, and they might be able to exploit it depending on who they are connected to or not. And many times that then come out to what my brother here was talking about. Can the state, what is it that will drive the state to want to shut down connectivity, for example? Is it only for good reasons, or is it sometimes also for bad reasons? Thank you. As to the second question, whether freedom of expression is the same as free speech, I think our constitution answers that question. And for me, it's mostly a question of responsibility. How do I exercise my freedom to express my views in a manner that is responsible, in that it does not injure the next person? A difficult question to resolve many times, but I think free speech, freedom of expression can start today. Therefore, there are certain traditions that have been established. And therein many times comes the question of public interest at the end of the day. That which serves the utmost public good, then must take priority. So if sometimes I must subordinate my personal privileges and rights for the good of the larger public, then that should be okay.
Thank you, Racheal. You bring out very important, 3 important issues there about accessibility, the literacy levels, and the privilege to be able to navigate that place. But of course, also the issue of responsibility while using those spaces. Over to you, Dr. Nasongo.
Thank you so much, Racheal. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My comment on particularly on the element of threats is that at a moment like this, when campaigns and elections are just a few weeks from now, the threats emerge with regard to using ICT platforms, particularly on promoting, let's say, inflammatory communication, alarmist kind of statements. And as we know, our politics is more or less very divisive, based on ethnic affiliations. And so, whereas we talk about free speech or freedom of expression, there are limitations that are clearly outlined in the Constitution. And there are also laws which deal with hate speech. And so what we will want to advocate so that the spaces that exist, the cyberspace is free and operational, is actually to urge and request for what Racheal has said, responsible use, so that we do not take that platform to be a medium of negative mobilization, issuing of threats, abuses, as well as, of course, incitement. Thank you.
Thank you, Nakitare. Even as Ratemo checks it, and you bring out the issue of the platforms, maybe I would want you to take the next question, which is what hate speech is and the challenges are in tackling it. I would also want Dr. Nasongo to take that one too, but Ratemo, you can go first.
Okay, I think the first three speakers have elaborated the first question very well. But I wanted just to add that maybe the greatest threat, according to me, are the communicators themselves who are irresponsible. So it all boils down to responsibility. Otherwise, if every communicator online will be responsible, then nobody could even think about maybe gathering them online. Because we see in the mainstream media, people are very irresponsible because there are ethics, there are guidelines, but you find that because online it's free space for all, then people tend to be, they feel too much free, and they even, interfere with other people's rights. I think hate speech, my colleague here will talk about it better, but in simple terms, what I think hate speech is that kind of a speech that, arouses hate against another person in terms of their tribe or ethnicity, or even their state of life. And if your speech is aimed at causing conflict, then that's hate speech. But I think the NCAC Act has a very elaborate explanation. But here, from the Media Council perspective, even journalists, they are supposed to ensure that besides, stopping their platforms or stopping, if I'm in charge of my pen, then I have like a license to either stop or maybe aid in extending it. But what I wanted to say is that journalists themselves, besides stopping it, then they should even, deny the hate mongers that platform to propagate hate speech. But journalists themselves, again, can be perpetrators, especially on their private space. Because sometimes you say that if it's you're on Twitter, on Facebook, that's your private space. That now you have the freedom of speech to say whatever you want. But again, because there are laws, and these laws came about because people were misusing the same space. And so, hate speech, I think it contravenes freedom of expression, because what could be hateful to one person may not be hateful to another person. So it depends from which perspective you are looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With regard to hate speech, I'd beg to, first of all, talk about what the Constitution presents to us with regard to freedom of expression. In Article 33, the Constitution in Part 1, or subsection 1, gives us the freedom what constitutes our freedom in terms of free speech, free expression. And subsection 2 out it states that for war. The next one is incitement to violence. The third one is hate speech. And the fourth one is promoting hatred. So those are the limitations beyond which there's no room for expression, or rather the Constitution limits or restricts us. Now come to NCI Act, National Cohesion and Integration Act of 2008. And in simple terms, it's utterances or words which are insulting, threatening, or abusive. This could be uttered verbally, or could be written, could be in form of perhaps a picture, but which portrays or communicates insulting, threatening, abusive, with an intention to cause ethnic hatred. And when we talk about ethnic hatred, the same NCI Act defines what ethnic means. Ethnic has to do with the ethnic group or tribe. It has to do with the religion or race or color. So when the words that are formed or that are communicated include either they are threatening, they are abusive, they are insulting with an intention, which means the word should involve the ethnicity of the other person, or the race of the other person, or the religion of the other person. Now, when such words are uttered, then that constitutes what we call hate speech as per the law. But of course, what is a bit of a challenge is every abuse in Kenya today, you'll find Kenyans saying, okay, that is hate speech. What are you doing as NCIC, or what's the government doing? So and so has abused the other one very badly. So it's important that we are able to distinguish what constitutes hate speech, what constitutes defamation, what constitutes a personal attack of the character or the person of the other person, the other individual. I think stop there so that my colleagues can add before we talk about challenges if possible.
Maybe picking it up from there, because the definition has been very clear. So, and somebody who directly works online, in charge of the digital online, how are the online platforms contributing to a hate speech and privacy violation? How are you perpetuating this? Not you, but the online platforms.
I have a few difficulties with some of the aspects of what Atari and even James have put across. First, taking on hate speech. I think many times we get stuck in the very in the surface of the issues around hate speech. Because from where I sit, I think hate speech is not so much about the speech itself, but it's got more to do with the people who have the opportunity to then drive that hate. Speech is just a manner in which it presents itself. Yeah. So unless we are willing and able and we deliberately go out to go into the foundations that drive and motivate people and appropriate opportunities for those people to then express those thoughts in speech, I think we'll be talking here until the daddies come home, but we wouldn't get anywhere. So if the issue, and I'm happy that you talked about challenges, if the issue is about the law, then I think the first step should be to look at that law and ensure the law takes us to the roots of the problem. Because just trying to crucify me because of the opinion and feelings that I have without dealing with the root causes of that, it doesn't get us anywhere. Because you may deal with me, but then Rose will come next. So how many of us will you deal with before we sort out this issue? So for me, that's the first thing. The second struggle I have is, James, I hope I'm wrong, but seem to suggest that shutdown is okay at a certain level when it comes to abuse of online spaces. But my view is that before the internet came, before digital disruption came to us, we already had laws that gave people a recourse should you feel that you are aggrieved by what I speak, be it verbally or through technology. So that should such occasions occur, then run with those defamation laws. And then with the criminal aspects, run with those criminal aspects. I don't think we should throw the baby with the bathwater by dragging a shutdown. Yeah. I think we should build our institutions and update them and make them more responsive so that those of us who injure other people's characters in the online space, the law should be up to date so that those who feel aggrieved can take the opportunity to go to the justice system and derive benefits from that. Thank you.
When the laws were formed, the challenges that we are getting online were not with us. If we're talking early in the morning and we're talking about cybersecurity laws. We still don't have cybersecurity laws. So how do we then secure, how do we protect the online spaces? How can we use them well, so especially when it comes to issues of incitement or hate speech? Because I think the title was very clear on, apart from inciting, threatening and abusing, he said there must be an intention for it to be hate speech. So as a person on the online platforms, you should be able to identify the intention. So how would we secure these places?
Then we should invest in strengthening the cyber laws, not shutting down communication between individuals in that space. We should put more effort in making sure our laws are responsive to, as far as that goes. Yeah? What I tend to be against is the fact that we make 100 people suffer because of one person's activities. Yeah.
Wakabi, if you could just take the same question, tell us how can we protect the online spaces? How can we use them more responsibly?
Churchill has talked about the need for laws. Obviously, we need laws that strongly criminalize the punish hate speech. But I don't think that laws in themselves are sufficient safeguard against hate speech online. I think we already have laws in this country which criminalize hate speech, but I think, like we've heard from the official from NCIC, there is a lot of talk of why are we seeing what we consider hate speech online, but then the Commission is not able to take action against that. The issue there, in my view, is to look at how these platforms are being used to propagate hate speech, but then also recognize the challenge that there are in addressing the issue of hate speech on online mediums. I know we'll talk a bit later about what actions each of us should take. Then maybe at that point we can talk about what other additional actions can be done on top of lawmaking. Public education is one of them, but I think we'll talk about them at that stage. So the problematic part about fighting hate speech online, which I think the NCIC and other bodies that fight hate speech are experiencing, relates, for instance, to the virality of social media in terms of one simple message by one individual will go so far in a short period of time. There is also the problem of our eagerness as individuals to sometimes share messages which we think are either funny or they are without intentionally realizing that we might be actually spreading hate speech, which calls for some sort of introspection on our part. The content that we keep sharing as individuals, does this in some way create hate speech, offend somebody's privacy? Should I share this? There is also, of course, the issue of the anonymity. Many of us are promoters of the right to anonymity because in many of the countries around here, there is potential presence for legitimate expression of opinion. But the online mediums also make it possible for people who are propagating what any good law recognizes as hate speech to hide their identities, which again makes it difficult for agencies such as NCIC to be able to identify and prosecute them. So, in that kind of scenario, we would need the laws, but we would also need the other actions that go beyond lawmaking in order to have any chance of minimizing hate speech in online mediums.
Thank you, Wakabi. You bring up a very important point of anonymity, and I want to open to the floor, but before that, maybe just ask the judge, are the penalties stiff enough? Is prosecution enough? Considering that, is it 1 million or 6 months? That is the penalty for hate speech. Is that enough?
Yeah, I think the penalty is reasonable. 1 million if you are found guilty, or 3 years. Of course, as we look at the reality, perhaps the major and the most dangerous perpetrators of hate speech are people with means, either politicians and all that. So you'll find the argument that we must stiffen the penalties, raise the penalties, perhaps 5 years and 5 million. But now what happens with that ordinary Kenyan or student, some of whom we have encountered in the process of investigations? How can a university student or a college student pay 5 million? So as it is, what I want to point out is that the best approach would be create sufficient awareness so that for those who are using these platforms, they know which limits they cannot go beyond. But those who may deliberately disobey or break the law, then I think punishment becomes necessary as a deterrent. But to add on what my colleague mentioned in terms of limitations, you'll find that some of the bloggers are actually foreign-based. They could be Kenyans, but they reside outside the country. So you trace a lot of vitriol or a lot of hate being perpetrated, but when we investigate, you find that perhaps someone's in Canada, Australia, and so on. So again, of course, the tedious processes of investigation, the tedious processes of proving before a court of law, and this, of course, to do with electronic kind of evidence, which is very stringent. But of course, this is not an hindrance, because whatever challenges there were earlier on, we have progressively overcome them. So I think what is very important is how do we ensure that there is a responsible use of the cyberspace. Perhaps there are opportunities when we have the nation taking the direction of digital learning within schools. Can we input the ethics of the use of these gadgets, these platforms? If that is done effectively, then I'm sure, as it were, we shall just be dealing with deviants who cannot miss in society. But the rest of the general public will be alert and of course ensure that the right thing is done. I'm also happy to comment that today, as we speak, Kenyans are quite alert. In fact, most of the reports we are receiving at the Commission is actually Kenyans, the users of the social media and other internet platforms, who are alerting us. So there's someone perhaps takes a photo of some communication and sends to us asking, isn't this incitement, isn't this hate speech? And from that we can be able to trace and identify whoever is doing that. And also to respond slightly on what Churchill pointed out, that we should not be perhaps adversarial. Instead we look at the, what you may call, the underlying issues. But what do we do with a case where someone posts, just got an example, not to show you which location of this country, but someone says, we shall not share leadership, this count leadership with the dogs. And you know this about the alignments within the counties. And it appears like the minorities are now getting included within the arrangements. And someone posts inciting others that we cannot allow ourselves to share power with the dogs. We would rather have 1 billion binds of bloodshed. So do we go to the background, to the underlying issues, or that's a criminal mindset? Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll open the floor to questions. Please move to the microphones. Anybody wants to ask a question, please move close to. There are 2 microphones. There's one there, and there's the other one on this side. But yes, Dr. raised a very pertinent point that maybe we'll come back to as we're closing. The church must be thinking about it. So let's start on the left. Please say your name and whom you're directing your question to.
My name is Cynthia from Captain. We can't hear you. My name is Cynthia. My name is Cynthia from Clayton, and my question is directed to Dr. Where do you draw the line between cyberbullying and hate speech?
Cyberbullying and hate speech.
My name is Ratemo from Nakitare as well. My question goes to NCIC. You talked about foreign hate speech when it comes to maybe other countries, like foreign people, different people from different countries. But I feel like you didn't finish explaining how, concluding on the matter, because what happens in such a situation, do you leave it now to Facebook or these international social media platforms to resolve the issue, or you continue following up the matter with them? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. My question goes to Dr. My name is Nasongo. I'm part of the Internet mailing list. My question is regarding the definition of hate speech and the language we use to refer to this. And specifically, I'm interested in illustrations, emojis, the use of imagery and illustrations to direct hate. I think approaching it as hate, when you say that hate speech, we're already talking about speech in this sense, but we see imagery coming very big. Do we need to change the language? Do we need to start from a different premise when approaching this? And then my second question is regarding intent, especially on social media and online platforms. When someone says an intent to spread hate, when now we see companies developing things that make us consent in a way that are very easy. When you look at share, double tap, like, how can we define intent in such an environment where you press buttons without knowing actually you consented, or you are just trying to express an opinion in a way that's not well defined? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Efren Kinyanito from Article 19. I have a question. This goes back to the discussion about whether we have enough legislation or not. A question and a comment. We've seen the guidelines being drafted by the NCIC and the Competition Authority about bulk SMS and social media content, sharing on social media content. And these guidelines, just a question and a comment. Does NCIC and the CA, I wish the CA person was here, do they keep in touch with current court rulings about some of the matters that they are trying to come up with, the guidelines? For example, some of the terms here being drafted have been discussed before the High Court before, in Geoffrey and Gary case, where sometimes like in misleading, offensive, have been ruled to be unconstitutional because they are vague. So that's the question, does NCIC keep in touch with the current developments in the jurisprudence in the courts? Second, we see these guidelines referring to a conditional, referring to undesirable content, strong message being contemplated under the condition of the content service provider license. We see these guidelines, and not just these guidelines, but we see a trend. We're trying to come up with laws. They may be well intended, but then some of these things are not publicly available. Like the CSP license is not publicly available, and you're referring to it in the definition. So that's the question: do they? How participatory is the process the coming up with laws, NCIC, when they're coming up with it, and also. When giving, participating in this, how often do they contact jurisprudence and what is happening under the law? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Fatima Zingira from Facebook. This is more of a comment than a question because I think it's come up a few times. I'm really happy to see that the booklets that I printed out on our community standards seem to have run out pretty quickly, but I hope I'll try to get more. We have noticed as a team that there is a general trend of under-reporting when it comes to our community standards. So when I hear that, oh, there's hate speech on the platform, people are talking about spilling blood, people are calling people dogs, those are all against our rules. And what we need is to make sure that people are reporting that this content is on the platform, so that way we can take it down. I think it's come up in several different panels as well that the content, if reported, is taken down. But what we've seen is people don't report the content because they don't know how to report the content. So I'm just going to repeat what I said at the beginning of the day, that I am here all day. If you have questions as to how to report content, what is hate speech according to our policies, what is graphic violence, how do we define it, what do we look at, the booklet as well goes into extensive detail. We have a blog, Facebook newsroom that also discusses how we define hate speech and how we come to those policies. And if you also Google hard questions by Facebook, we've also answered questions from the public as to how we deal with this issue. And further, we've also got a team coming in next week to discuss these issues to the public. I think the invite is going to go out tomorrow, and to hear questions from you as to what else do you need to know. So a lot of the content that you often see on the platform, we actually don't allow at all. We don't proactively hunt it down because we have to wait on our community to tell us. So when we ask questions as to how can Kenyans be better online users, part of it is reporting the content to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Facebook, for being very responsive. I think, yeah, we've seen you grow. Okay, go ahead.
So my name is Mutili, and mine is just a comment on the question asked by the person from Article 19. Just for your information, on the CA website, they actually have availed templates of all licenses, whether it's CSP, NFP, ASP, all the licenses that they issue. Without like the names of an organization, that's why it's a template, but that is essentially what is customized. They just put in like the name and maybe the number. So if you're concerned that you've never seen what a CSP license actually has, just go to the CA website and you should be able to find the templates under the telecommunications drop down. Yeah, so I'm a lawyer, I don't work for CA, but it's good to actually let people know this information.
Thank you very much for sharing. That's very important. So, Dr. you spoke, but I'll also ask the other panelists to chip in whenever on any of the questions you feel you strongly about.
Thank you so much for those questions. I not want to go to cyberbullying. I'm sure there are more competent people to talk about it here. But I think hate speech, I attempted to define it as to the best of my knowledge and what it is. May I address myself on this question of hate speech that emanates from outside the country? Of course, that does not mean that there are non-Kenyans who are doing that. There are Kenyans in diaspora. But when this happens is, of course, we investigate and together with the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, files are open and the necessary processes put underway. Of course, now through that, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations also in a position to highlight, particularly to Facebook and other platform administrators, to curtail such communication. In terms of the question on language and imagery, particularly the use of creative arts to communicate, of course you can be able to identify whether it's something expressed in a light note as a joke, or whether it's meant to communicate or convey hatred. So it all, of course, now remains with the processes of investigation. If the suspect or the suspected offender can be able to explain and exonerate himself or herself that it was perhaps by accident, because at times you may go to your phone, or whether it's iPad or laptop, and at times you press things you don't even understand. So if that happened, that you can prove, I'm sure, if you did not intend to do what you conveyed or communicated, then you will be able to convince the investigators. You are not simply arrested and held into or presented before court. There is a process. You will be summoned, you will come and do a statement, you will explain yourself, and with that process, then it's possible not to be prosecuted. On the question of guidelines between NCIC and CAK, one, I want to mention that this is not something that has just emerged from the blues. 2013, before 2013 elections, there were guidelines, and these guidelines are not generalized to all forms of social internet use. It's actually bulk messages which are specific as perhaps a campaign or mobilization and so on from political parties. So what we are saying is there are times when you will just receive unsolicited campaign message either on your phone or on your Facebook page or whatever. This must be, of course, vetted in some way. Now, if you look at those regulations keenly, you'll find that it's not even NCIC or CAK which is supposed to look at those bad messages. It's upon the media concerned, if it's TV or if it's Safaricom or whatever. They're supposed to look at it and be satisfied whether this message contravenes laws that exist or not. But if there is a doubt, if let's say Safaricom has received a message from a particular political party, campaign, whatever, and they think there is something that they are not keen on, clear on, the regulation simply says it can now be forwarded to NCIC. So it's not NCIC policing everywhere what is being sent out. It's a matter of just looking at the message. What is it conveying? Is it abusive? Is it insulting? Is it likely to stir up ethnic hatred? Because if it goes out as a bad message to, let's say, millions of voters, even 5 million, and it's insightful and it's possible, its intention is to arouse some element of violence or uprising or rejection of something. Of course, we do not want as a nation to get to that point. Reversing becomes difficult. It's easier to handle a message before it's relayed than to deal with the consequences of that message. I think that's what I can say on that. And I'm trying to handle all the questions, but I'm sure my colleagues will comment.
One of the things that I'm thinking about is how to measure that intention. I think maybe that's one of the questions. But just to add on what Nakitare said about clicking a button, I think ignorance is no defense, and I think that's why Racheal talked about digital literacy, that there's need for a lot of sensitization and digital literacy among the citizens. But also, I think it's also important for us to note that we are all publishers. So the minute you click, you press a button, you're publishing to all your contacts, and that's how those messages go viral. So I think there's the question of also responsibility that comes to play. Racheal, you're going to distinguish between cyberbullying and hate speech, and Wakabi can add.
I'm sure Wakabi has better views on that, but I'm not a lawyer. But from a communication point of view, I think the main distinction is that cyberbullying many times is targeted at an individual, while hate speech, by definition, is towards a group. Nakitare could correct me. Insofar as cyberbullying goes, I think there's a bit of effort that has gone on in the Kenyan laws. I think many of us may be aware that quite a few people have been prosecuted for sending, if you like, bad SMSs to individuals. Yeah? That can be extended into the larger digital sphere. Cyberbullying gets very murky sometimes, especially on social media, and many times it's targeted at women. But I think there's a huge awareness gap in there. Many people don't know what recourse they can take should they encounter such. But I think there's a bit of effort in the law, there's a bit of opportunity that the law currently provides to help give some relief.
If there are any more questions, please come and line up as Wakabi takes the distinction between cyberbullying and hate speech.
Actually, I would like to speak something different if you don't mind. I think Racheal has said what seems to be my own understanding of the difference between cyberbullying and hate speech. So let me not say more about that. Well, maybe later, but there's something which the doctor talked about, which I wanted to speak to. It has come also up in earlier conversations. The issue of intent. How do we actually establish intent in order for somebody to be held responsible? Is very important in this conversation. A problem is that issues of, for instance, slang and colloquialism may be misunderstood. I think somebody spoke about the issue of this image. How do we know whether this person is just making fun or they are not? But the important element that comes to mind there is that the laws that we have need to be laws that protect legitimate opinion. But also the implementation of those laws should not be selective. In many instances, we have had complaints that there is selective prosecution of individuals who are accused of hate speech, and that has actually been quite prominent in this country as well. So if there is a thin line, for instance, between offensive language and hate speech, if there can also be problems in distinguishing intent, yeah, then we need institutions that are strong and independent. We are talking about ombudsman institutions, we are talking about the police and judiciary, we are talking about commissions such as NICC that need to be both provided with capacity and awareness, but also manned by individuals that really care about free speech.
Wakabi. Ratemo, maybe you'd want to add on the debate on intent. How do we measure intent?
I think that is very vague because it also depends on who is trying to measure intent. Just like one of the person was asking a question, said, when you talk of offensive to, and at what particular time? Maybe prior to 0708, could we be still having the same debate? Because the issue of having emojis, people having illustrations, cartoons, which if they happen now, they could be deemed as offensive or hate speech. So I think it also depends on the situation and the context. But I think these laws may be, I think they impede on our freedom to some extent. And I wanted to quickly say, Churchill said that in my initial statement there, it's like I was supporting shutdown, yeah? Let's go on record that I don't support that. But if there is an individual who is offending according to the law, then let the law go for that individual. But don't, victimize majority because of one individual's issue.